Hey everybody, it is Monday, and pretty soon the other side of this screen will be Tony Maserati again. There he is. Hey Tony,
Hi, all.
how's it going?
Good. My power is still not happening. I don't know
Oh,
why.
well, in the interests of having an interview longer than about 8 minutes, you want to get that sorted out before we dive
Yeah,
in?
that's a great idea.
That's a good
Um,
idea.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna,
I think having the other end plugged in would be good. That's
something about that I think you're absolutely correct
yeah.
about.
It's
Um,
always the number one thing in the operator manual. Is it
so
plugged in?
can you tell me uh, that between the shores, have people seen that yet?
No, 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 and we can't talk about that yet.
Oh, we can't even talk.
No, no, no. We do. Everybody has to stick around to the very end because we have a little bit of an announcement at the end.
Oh,
But I don't want to take away from our chat because that's
I'm
what's
not going to
important right
say
now.
anything. Should we pick it up from where we left off? This is.
Well, I think so. I mean, first of all, we should point out that you are at Mirrorball today, as opposed to your homeroom in
Yep.
in uh, in LA. So that's why it looks different. He hasn't just remodeled. So we'll get to the whole mirror ball entertainment thing a bit more later. But yeah, let's just pick it up. So we ended with the epic, epic, epic tale of the Mariah Carey ODB fantasy track featuring a big sample of the Tom Tom Club. But yeah, just from there.
I mean, I don't remember exactly where we left off, but I did want to mention the fact that I it I I used to rollerblade around the live room because even we used a tiny little section of the live room to record vocals, which was completely like gobo housed. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially it's like like a complete gobo house, but it was a tiny little spot. That room was like a basketball
Oh, it
court.
was huge. I mean, I think you could
Yeah.
get a 50-piece orchestra in there pretty comfortably.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so I used to, to act because in those days we were in the studio for 20 hours or more a day.
Yeah.
So just for exercise, I used to rollerblade around that room, and and you know,
And I'm sure they loved that because there's no way that marked the floor.
I was just going to say, I wonder if Troy and Eddie would, curse me and then make some assistant get
Oh, I'm
down.
sure. I'm sure.
Hey, I forgot about that. Okay, never mind.
That's
Sorry about
funny. Also, I want to point out that this was the era in New York, because this is what year? 91-ish, 2-ish, something.
No, no, no. This is later than that.
It's later than that. Well,
I
I
don't.
was just curious, was the soup guy still
Oh
going?
yeah. Oh, the soup
The
Nazi.
soup Nazi, as depicted in that incredible episode of Seinfeld, he was a real dude, and he
Was a
wasn't
real
that far from the studio. And when we worked there,
walking.
they would have to send two runners because the first runner would get in line, get to where they could see what soups were there. This is pre-cell phone, so he'd run to the phone booth, call the studio, say, "We got these soups. What's the order?" Get the order, hand it back to the second runner who was
Yeah,
in line and who was just getting up to the front. Because the lines
yeah.
were so long, there's no way you could wait twice, and there's no way you could stop looking at what it was.
That's correct. But I have to ask, had you ever gone and waited in line and not had an assistant get it
I
for you?
never got to, because like you, we were in the studio forever, and I never got to actually go.
Oh yeah, I've waited in that line and been freaked out to the point where he almost threw me out. So I have seen it firsthand. Like, I don't know if you remember oh, what was the Monty Python movie of the Holy Grail? Where one of the skits is, you're asked three questions, you have to
Right.
answer three questions, and one of the guys is like, "What is your favorite color?"
blue, no yellow.
Yeah,
Ah! Yeah, you
exactly.
get thrown off a bridge to your death if you get it wrong.
Right.
That's what
That's
that guy was
exactly how
like,
you
right?
feel when you get into the soup Nazi. You're like, he's like, what do you want? And you're like, I want oh yeah, the lobster bisque. And then if you hesitate longer, and then it's like bread or something else. And then you're like, no bread. Oh, and it's like, you go. I mean, it was really scary.
But the
And the
soup
line
was
was
that
huge
good.
around the block. And the soup was the best soup by far I had ever had to that point. I've had some close since then, but to that point, I didn't even know what soup was.
Was he putting drugs in there? Like, what was the deal with
I,
it? It was
I,
amazing, though.
it was the best soup. The
I
best.
also want to point out that we did actually send runners to White Castle every once in a while, and the closest one was in Jersey City. It's
hilarious.
It's God, we're such dicks. Go get 63 burgers because they're all that big. Anyway, we're not here to talk about. Oh, we can't actually. We're here to talk about whatever we want. So, all right. So let's get back into the flow of things here. So it's the beginning of the Puff dynasty. It's the beginning also, though, of your relationship with Tommy Mottola, which I think is a big deal. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, as I had mentioned regarding that little snippet there about starting to work on this Mariah thing and this remix, and Puff was completely confident and had a very friendly relationship with Tommy. I of course was very nervous and but shortly after that, Tommy called me to a meeting in his office, and it was really scary as well. I don't know why these meetings are scary back then, but I
They had
think
a lot of power. I mean, they had a huge amount of power.
those dudes, yeah, they did. I mean, he was one of 3 or 4, 5 people in the industry who kind of pulled all the strings and started a lot of people, but anyway, the meeting was really nice. It was friendly, and he was, of course, a complete professional and gentleman. But after that, I started actually working at their house, at Tommy and Mariah's house.
All right.
So, because Mariah was doing this, she had a production company, and she was producing an act, so they would send a limo for me because they lived up in I don't know, just north of the city. I can't remember.
Like Westchester-ish, something.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Did they have a White Castle up there? Because, sorry.
So they would send a limo. So, I'm living in the village. I'm on this little street. I'm living on 5th Street at the time. And, I had lived in a shithole. I mean, that's New York. And plus I didn't have a lot of dough. And so this is stretch limo waiting for me every morning or whatever time of day and blocking traffic, so all the neighbors were hating on me. And it was like, oh, goddamn. But it was nice. They would send me a car and go up to their place, and I'd be working in their awesome studio, in their awesome house. And it was great. And Tommy would come in. I mean, he gave me a tour of the house himself.
Wow.
I was like, don't you have an
tour guide?
Yeah. But, and that was lovely. And, really amazing place. And to see that kind of place was, just blew me away.
Right.
Not to mention just being able to go to the country and smell fresh air a few times a week. That was pretty awesome too. But yeah, Tommy, from that point on, I think Mick Gazowski was his guy.
Right. Mick was mixing.
Yeah.
Was Mick ever tracking for him, or was he just mixing at that point?
Well, the Mariah stuff was tracked by this guy, Dana LaChapelle, who was pretty amazing. Um, I think Mick was just mixing, but I could be wrong because Mick had a place in at least a similar area. I don't know if it was in the same town, but it was close.
Right.
From where Mariah and Tommy's house was. And so I remember Mick telling me that Eric Clapton had been to his place. I don't know if he was doing any overdubs or something. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think Mick was Tommy's main mixer, and Tommy was just sort of pulling on me occasionally for the more R&B and hip hoppy kind of things that he was doing, and I was very appreciative. It was great. Yeah, and I could never do what Mick did, so I never. As much as I tried, I couldn't figure out what Mick was doing.
Yeah, you got your own thing, but mix thing is mix thing, and it's a thing.
Yeah,
it's very much a thing. So that kind of steered you a little bit. I mean, you're saying that like Mick was still doing all the pop stuff, but you were doing more kind of crossover acts because of Tommy at that point, then, right? So not just sticking with Bad Boy Records projects and kind of helping you branch out of that, right?
Yeah. Tommy also had a close relationship with a guy named Corey Rooney, who I had worked with quite a lot previously. He had a good relationship with Trackmasters, Poke and Tone, who I had done a lot of work with. So he was pulling on them as well, and they would bring me in the same way that Puff brought me in on the Mariah thing. So our relationship became stronger and stronger because of a lot of that.
Right.
And it was terrific. I mean, I did the first J-Lo record, and getting a call from Tommy Mottola or any of those guys. I mean, at the time, getting on the phone with Clive or Tommy or, one of those top dudes was always, I was always pretty nervous and trying to interpret, it's one thing trying to interpret, what my producers were telling me, because I had close relationships with them.
Right.
So the interpretation, it's like, here, try this. Oh no, not that, this, or, but trying to, especially in those days, there's, to print a CD, have it messengered to Tommy, wait for him to listen, and then he calls you, and that's hours later, and who knows what's transpired in those hours, and you've got to sort of get in that frame of mind. So
yeah, well, and it's pretty special too, because it's you talk about it like, but everybody was getting calls from Tommy at some point, and that's not true at all. I mean, it's a pretty special thing, and
yeah, it was scary, and I knew it was special, and it was super cool. I mean, dude, just going into his office is amazing, that alone is like.
But also knowing that as opposed to most of the people who'd be involved in a record, if Tommy's excited, like, well, you're done. There's nobody else to convince, and the entire weight of that gigantic machine was going to be put behind this release because Tommy was into it. Not producers are happy, got the artist happy, A&R guy seems happy, now he's got to take it to the meeting. Like, you done.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. The thing that's super cool as well, he he'd listen to my opinions, which actually in some way was shocking. You know what I mean? For him to ask me my opinion about, what do you think about that guitar? Do we need to wait for the guitar until this section or something like that? First of all, I'm having a conversation like that with the president of the universe, but then to have him actually care what I think about the idea as well as actually, you know, makes the whole thing work
Well, and
really.
it says a lot about him. I mean, I think that, from the outside, he was just like this almost monolithic power, and
Mm.
people who never met him don't know, and your stories and things and whatever. But he's obviously, first of all, really into the music,
Yeah, totally.
no question, and not. I mean, you have to have a huge amount of confidence that maybe that turns to arrogance or whatever. But when it comes to, like, he knows what he knows, and he
Yeah,
knows what he likes, but he also knows what he doesn't know, which is a pretty good trait in someone with that much power, because you don't always get that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that all those guys who were at that level had had that ability. You know, they definitely could hear hits, and they knew the elements they were looking for that would hit those triggers, whether it was radio or whatever the purpose of the record was. But they were willing to listen, and they were willing to pay attention. And I didn't know that. I mean, you
No,
just
you
don't
wouldn't have thought
think.
it.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought it, and you just there's so much, like you said, you read about people and or you're told things from people who have had experiences, um, and or at least maybe third hand experiences, you know,
Yeah,
because that's
yeah,
generally all you get. And then to actually have a first hand experience and go, oh, this is totally workable and professional and creative, and you know what I mean? That's almost shocking to you when it happens.
yeah. Well, yeah, because you do get the impression from the stories that there's, it's not. Basically, you would assume it's not motivated by what they're listening to. Like, there's other stuff going on, and they're control freaks or
Yeah,
power hungry or whatever it is. But the reality is, they just don't have time to, like, very nicely let you down if you're sucking.
yeah,
So, if you have a bad experience, it's probably because you weren't up to the task or something. They were never mean to people who were doing good work, because they wanted you to keep doing good work. And there's some people who are mean to everybody, and that's a totally different story. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, he rejected at least. I mean, I remember two huge mixes that were rejected, and to this day, I wish I could. Those are ones that I'd like a you know, a mulligan on. I'd like to get that again. I mean, they were huge records. So,
and these are ones that, like, you did mixes, and it's like, no, 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 and you had someone else do it.
you know, one of them was Ricky Martin. What was his first huge hit? Um,
The Livin' La Vida Loca.
yeah, yeah. One of them was that. Um, but I don't. I mean, I place all the blame on myself, but also, um, um, Desmond Child was the producer. He wouldn't talk to me, and it
Right.
was 96 tracks, two digital machines locked together, and no communication with Desmond. None. He wouldn't talk to me,
Wow.
and I and it was impossible to mix 96 tracks of music without some help.
And did Desmond have someone else in mind that he wanted to do it? And
I think probably,
probably.
yeah, probably so. And I think that I never, I mean, I'm not the kind of person who is overbearing. You know, I've never been that person who did a mix and said, "This is it. This is the best mix in the world. Don't ask me anything else." You know,
Right. Yeah,
I,
yeah. You want to work with people. You want to
yeah, I want to
interact.
communicate. So as much as I tried to communicate with Desmond, he wouldn't communicate with
And
me.
I can't remember who ended up mixing it, but I mean, that was very famously the first number one record done completely in Pro Tools.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know who. It might have been Serpent.
Yeah, it
I,
could have been. That might have been an early Serban thing. But I think that that was sort of the big deal about that, too. Because, of course, for them to make you two multi-tracks, we were talking before we went on air about making stems. Talk about making multi-tracks. Especially, there's no way you had 96 I/O on a Pro Tools rig back then. Maybe you had 32. So that's multiple passes.
yeah.
Just,
Oh yeah,
oh,
different things.
apparently Charles Dye. Charles Dye mixed that. How
Oh,
about that?
Charles.
Mark
Okay,
has just texted in.
good for him. I
Yeah.
mean,
But
look, I again, I don't blame anybody but myself. but I tried really hard to communicate to Desmond. He would not communicate. Robbie
So
Rose was communicating with me, who's an amazing producer and writer. But you know,
so I'm curious though. At the time, obviously, you're just bummed out and like, it's a big deal. But when you heard where it ended up and when you knew what you had done, did you get it, or was it just like, no, man, I really think my take on it was awesome?
no, no, I think that a record like that's a team effort. There's no one dude who's never heard the track before. I never heard the track, didn't know anything about it.
Right. So you just
Except
never
Tommy
even felt like
and
you got to a place that should have even been considered, really.
yeah, exactly. Like
Right.
I don't think I even figured out, I might have figured out the drums, but I'm sure I didn't figure out a shit ton of other things. It takes a team when you've got that much, whether it's back then on a console that you're given, I mean, Crazy in Love took 2 weeks. I did this Ricky Martin thing in 2 days.
Right.
It should have taken 2 weeks,
Right.
especially considering and the Beyonce Crazy in Love was 2 weeks collaboratively with
Right.
everyone involved, including, Tommy, including everyone. So it's a whole different thing. So it was it was one of those, I wish I had another, I should have just shut it down and been like, can't do this without.
Right. Yeah. Now I'm at the point where when are you guys coming?
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't have the nutsack in those days. I was just starting out, and Tommy
This is
was
pre nutsack.
nutsack.
It's a different era. Well,
He
look,
was
you
putting a lot of hope in me, I think, and I seriously appreciated that. But I didn't have the nutsack to like call him up and say, "Yo, man, I need the team.
but
Let's get
also
everybody
that
here."
didn't like end your relationship either, right? It was
No,
just that was that one song, and off you went to the next one.
yeah, no, he was very, very nice.
So look, you brought up Beyonce. It's
Mm,
going to take us a while to talk about it. So should we just go there?
yeah, sure. I mean,
So, because there's the Destiny's Child record first.
yep. That was, I don't know which one it was. Maybe the third album for Destiny Child, with Bootylicious and Survivor and a bunch of those records. Yeah, that was uh, again my relationship with Tommy, and Teresa Lababera was a young A&R person at the time, and she had proven, with signing Destiny's Child, that she knew what she was doing. And Tommy asked her to chat with me about doing a record for her. And so I did a record for her. I did the first Jessica Simpson record that
All right.
she signed Jessie as well. And that did really well. And she had other people mixing the Destiny Child stuff as well. But she was willing to try me out. So we did, I think maybe, I don't know how many records we did on that album. But that went really well because she was very collaborative, and the girls were super collaborative. And most of the producers were okay with me doing it. When they weren't, she didn't, force me on them.
Right.
And then when Crazy in Love was going to happen, our working relationship had really started to do really well, and Tommy was totally behind us, so that worked out well. And one of the things about Teresa that's pretty, one of the many things that's pretty incredible is her ability to pick songs, man, was always amazing. And So, she was able to just choose just amazing songs. She didn't care if the producer was big time and had lots of credits and all of that, because Rich Harrison did Crazy in Love. And I mean, his credits at that time were really A. Marie, I think.
Right.
He had a few other credits of songs that he and I had done, but the bulk of his credits were A. Marie, which is a record that he produced and wrote and signed, and
But anyone listening to One Thing, like we talked about, realizes like, holy shit, there's something going on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt. And Teresa was smart enough to jump in on that. So and that's where Crazy in Love came from. But she was always really good at choosing some unknowns many times. She didn't care. It wasn't a political thing. And she would just choose the best songs, the best productions. And I think that first Beyonce record was a testament to her true ability to choose amazing songs and great talent.
Right.
And B just fucking killed it.
Yeah.
She just killed it. I was working 2 rooms. I had Studio 3 and 4 going when we were working on that record. That was some insane. And those were the early days of Pro Tools as well.
Right.
So clip gaining was not
a thing.
So you would have to, there was a plugin for gaining. So we would use that plugin to gain S's and things like that. Man, that was hell. That was hell.
Easier than tape, but
yeah, fair point. But I don't know that S's come through in tape as much as they do.
Well, maybe not. But I don't think you were sitting there with the Pro Tools wishing that you were on tape at that point.
No, probably not.
We can be nostalgic if you want, but
I think there was tape involved though, because I vaguely remember rewinding. But I think that might have also been just the way that I was used to working.
Well, it was really hard to drive SSL automation without a tape machine at that point. So sometimes, I mean, I remember some sessions, there were code-only masters. That's it. You had a real tape that had time code on it and no audio.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Oh my God, I had to edit. That was when I gave up on SSLs.
Really?
Because of Crazy in Love. I mean, there was throw in some Crazy in Love and then throw in some Black Eyed Peas. But because editing automation on the SSL.
The time shift join stuff. Yeah.
That shit was. So I'd end up having to mix a song like 6 times.
Right.
Redo the automation for, from chorus 2 out. If there was an edit after chorus 2, I mean, you could kind of try and do the edit.
Yeah, you could, but it was squirrely.
Never perfect.
So just to be a geek for a second, so then what'd you go to from there? Or did you poke around looking for a while?
No, I went full in on tools.
Right.
And what I started doing is I'd set all the faders to 0. And
right.
Calibrate them with tone. And
so you'd still use like the EQ and
occasionally
dynamics and all that.
Yeah, because you can recall that.
Yeah, just everything except faders and mutes, basically.
Yeah. And I got a D command and started using the D command for automation. And I wouldn't use any outboard compressors, right? Because I was doing rides.
Exactly, and they would all be post fader. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would have to use internal. And at that point, it's still, tools didn't have the delay compensation thing together yet. Right. There was no hardware inserts yet. So I was a little ahead of the curve, and I paid dearly for it on a few approvals. There were a couple of mixes I did, and I actually felt bad because I just fucked them up because I was headstrong on not using a console. But whatever. That's
and
life.
Now look.
you know, that's the thing about this career, right? You make choices, you make decisions, you know, you just try and keep things moving forward.
Yeah,
But one,
well, and you got to serve the song. You can't say let's not do that edit because it's going to mess up my automation.
yeah, exactly.
You know, that's not really an option, is it?
And the thing that you get good at is, you know, I memorized where my fader moves were. You
Right.
know, it got to the point where, of course, I even put tape on every fader, and you know, had little notes on the tape itself. You know, B section one. You know, shit like that. Just
Right. So you'd
um,
actually gone back to manual mixing so that whatever you did on the console, you could just redo in real time and be done with it.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, when I had to work on a console,
yeah.
which occasionally I did, you know, Ron Fair was slow to allow me to do internal mixes, so it took a while. I remember Ron coming in, and I had a D command on top of the SSL at the record plant, and you know, I had this plexiglass thing made so it would fit on top on top of the SSL. And he was like, what's happening? And I was like, it's all good. Don't worry about it. We're still using the console.
Right.
I just I just don't want to have anything to do with the automation system. But he was cool. That was Christina Aguilera.
Right.
That
Well, we're
played
not,
her.
we got to get a little more Beyonce talk out of you before we move on
Oh, okay.
to anyone else. Because, I mean, you have worked with her on how many records now? I mean, is it all of them or?
There was B Day was the only one I didn't work on.
Right.
Um, because I don't want to get into that particular reason, but yeah, that's the only record I did not work on.
Right.
Uh,
So you worked on a ton.
yeah, yeah, not always the singles. I mean, I yeah, hadn't done all the singles, and now you know, Stu White is working on all of her stuff. He's doing recording, he's doing everything,
Yeah.
additional production even.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
and he's a talented, talented boy. He's
Super talented guy. Yep.
really, really good.
And occasionally he throws me the ones that either he doesn't like or he's having a problem.
Well, look, that's the only reason I got to work on a Beyonce record, right? It was
Yeah,
like there were a couple you had just not had time to get to. There's just too much going
yeah,
on,
that's right.
and I got a
Yeah,
call, and that was awesome. You know,
yeah,
I'm glad you
yeah.
thought of me. It was great.
And you killed it, and you set the stage. I swear to God, she heard that mix and was like, "Okay, this is going in the right direction. Now I'm feeling happy." And we were all like, "Ha, ha."
Because no one had slept for weeks, and
We,
which was awesome. I mean, unfortunately, I never got to meet her. I never got to talk to her, but you know, it was great to be part of that. It was also, I've got to say, it was great to be slightly on the outside of that machine looking in because that machine can eat people. It's
oh, at us.
yeah.
At us.
I came over pretty late in the process, and you were pretty loopy, and there was pie and whiskey everywhere. It
Well,
was
it was, I think it was 3 weeks of no one left. I mean, I may have gone home twice to shower,
right.
and maybe my assistants same, but like Justin, James, Tyler, round the clock.
Well, and this was the self-titled record that she dropped out of nowhere on a Friday at midnight, and I had absolutely no idea it was coming out. Then maybe you knew by the end, but
We got a phone call from Teresa as Teresa was leaving town. She had stayed here. She was like in the booth sleeping on a couch,
yeah,
and she had stayed here for those 3 weeks as well. And she was like at the air, like on her way to the airport, and she called and she was like, "Turn on your, you know, your
anything.
yeah, whatever it was back then." She was like, "Open up your computer, turn on iTunes," and that's what we did, and there it was.
And it was
And
out. And I know that was Friday at midnight, and I know I delivered a mix Thursday at like well, Friday at 2 a.m. or something like that. And then
Oh, I
I seem to remember, and I could be making this up, but I seem to remember once it got close, because we didn't know the deadlines, they were mastering every single version that we sent in case that was it. Because then they'd
we
already be done, and cutting them into the videos, because of course every song had a video.
I gave up my room, this room. I gave this room up to James and Justin because we had two giant screens here. One screen was what was at mastering at Tom Coyne's. The other screen was what was going to be sent or what was in progress. So, and I'm down the street. I've got three rooms going elsewhere. Um, Tyler's in a room in my little B room, just listening for clicks and pops. And then Teresa and her team are just going through, credits and going through details of every single note that B comes back with. I mean, the whole place is humming. I'm running from room to room trying to just get a good mix. And that's why when we called you, Teresa was like, "Are you going to get this done?" And I said, "No, I'm not." Realistically, I mean, I was, of course, trying to get the information from her about when they needed it, like when is the
Exactly.
realistic deadline. And she's like, "I can't tell you that." And I'm like, "Well, I need a rough
Yeah,
idea."
it's
So
hard to answer whether I can get it done or not.
right, I need a rough idea on when you need it, and the actual need is the important part of this. And that's when she told me, and I was like, okay, so yeah, let's call Andrew. Let's move this along. And I would have thrown you four mixes, but Stu was really, handling a lot, and
Yeah.
that's when he just ramped up and really covered things in a really nice way. He would be sitting in here with Derek, who was one of B's. Well, he's her MD, and Derek would be sitting here with Stu and Justin or James, and they'd have my mix recalled in here, and they'd just be calling out, more bottom end on this, more, do a ride on this part or whatever. And I let them do that. And then I'm in another room trying to mix a whole new song. And then I'd feed it to them and they would do. So it was, yeah, that one was phew, over the top.
So
I never,
that's the most chaotic they ever were.
um, the weird thing is you could use the word chaotic, but the reality is, I think, this is a human being who was making. Don't forget, she was making those videos at the time.
Yeah.
It's not like she's hanging out. B is like making videos, so she's got a whole video editing team going as
And a
well.
very young daughter.
Yeah, was Blue Ivy born
Yeah, I
at
think
that
she
point?
was. I
Oh
think
my
so.
God, you might be
I'm
right.
pretty sure.
Yeah,
I could have that wrong, but I think she was like really young then.
yeah. Jesus, I didn't even think of that, but God, you might be right. Um, so she's got the whole video team going. The video team is trying to communicate with us, but the language is just not the same. So, yeah, I mean, so it wasn't so much chaos as it had never been done.
Right.
That's the bottom line. It had never been done. So trying to ramp up or trying to get something happening. I mean, originally Teresa came to me and was like, "Oh, can you mix this?" And I'm like, "Of course, I'm down." You know. And I had communicated with Stu about where he had left things off, and I, he and I ended up doing collaboration on quite a number of those mixes. But she was like, "Okay, what studio?" And I'm like, "Wait, what am I doing? And when do I need it done?" I was like, "We got to bring this in house, like bring this to my space. I'm not going to go." At the time, there was no studios in New York. So, and I think maybe we had called Record Plant, or I don't even remember, but we might have called a couple places. But Glenwood Place, find a place where you have an enclosed environment.
Yeah.
No one else could be, but they were booked. So I was like, okay, we're doing it my spot, and we'll just all hands on deck, throw everybody else out of the building. And so it just had never been done, really. And I think that was the thing about it. And I can't tell you how lucky I was to have the team of guys. At that point, my guys, Justin and James, had really just sort of gotten, their confidence level up. And Tyler was brand new. That was his first gig.
Thinking they're all going to be like that.
Yeah. And so really, we had just gotten fast internet, like literally the month before. If we had not gotten that fast internet, it wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
And Tom Coyne, there was one mix that we did. Tom's assistant went home. So we're here sending mixes over and over, And Tom's assistant, I forget her name now, really lovely and talented person. But she went home just to shower. And it was like the final day or one of the.
But of course, no one knew it was the final day.
Yeah, exactly. So I called up Dave Kutch at Mastering Palace, and I was like, "Can you send somebody down there?" Because Tom doesn't, Tom is a mastering guy. He doesn't do all the tweaky, whatever the fuck computer shit that needs to get done. So I got Dave Kutch to send his second down to Sterling just to do some shit, some technical shit until Tom Coyne's second could come in, after she showered. Oh my God, it was insane.
Pretty nuts.
Insane. But after doing that, it's like nothing. I'm sure everyone involved in that was like, I got this.
Right.
There isn't anything that anyone can throw at you that goes beyond that. No way. It was just beyond. Really amazing. And the fact that it, to this day, it didn't win the Grammy. I'm sorry. I love, what's his name? Beck.
Right. Yeah.
Love Beck. Love you, baby. But I'm sorry. Beyonce deserved every fucking award. That was an amazing record.
I'm pretty sure Beck said that too, didn't he?
You know what? He may have. I was so shocked that B didn't win that I was just like, I love you, dude, but I'm sorry.
But not that much.
It wasn't even about me.
No, I know.
It had nothing to do with me. I was just like, this woman deserves all those awards. She deserves everything for that record. It was an amazing undertaking for her to even conceive of it.
Right.
What about actually have it come to fruition and be released?
Yeah.
Really. It was an amazing thing. And it was amazing, heartfelt, amazing stuff. Same as Lemonade. Even Lemonade, which wasn't like that as far as its finishing, but same thing. Both those records, I was like, there's something fucked up going on at Mraz.
Well, it's there are lots of we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole, but it's just, you got to join to vote. And there are a lot of communities that just traditionally don't join, so they're not represented. And unfortunately, that's the deal. It's a members-only vote. It's not a popular vote. And if all the members are people who've been in there since the 70s, that's the demographic you got voting. So, there's been, especially with the last CEO leaving, lots of talk about whether things are fixed or whatever. And it's not. They've got, some oversight and stuff like that to make sure. And the only reason there's oversight is because Jethro Tull won the first Best Metal Band Grammy. And they're like, okay, that can't ever happen again. But again, that was the voting membership are like, Jethro Tull, metal band, and they should win because it's the only one anyone had heard of. So, you know, but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't disagree there. But I think also it's an interesting thing when you see the way records kind of take hold in certain areas, and in the awards it's always a different thing, but it's always about songs. Like the entire Morning Phase record is cool, but that one song, and I'm not going to remember the name of it now, just really caught people the same way Holocene by Bon Iver, I think, like catches people. So even if you're not a Bon Iver fan, that song is like, oh my God. So as amazing as everything on that Beyonce record is, I don't know that there was one in particular that caught people, and that's what sways that stuff, I think.
You're right. You're right. I think, yes, I agree. And, you know, I don't even remember if it was released on Spotify. It might have only been a title release, which then
No, I think it was
there.
before all that, because it was the Apple, it was the iTunes release first, and so I think it
Yeah.
went everywhere eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's more about, I mean, in particular, that's just about the voting membership, but it's what everyone's been talking about for the last 6 months, very rightly so, is that being black and being a woman is not as good as being white and being a man.
Yeah. And I'm happy that that's going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't mean as good. I meant as good for the person as a baseline.
I understood exactly what you
Okay,
meant.
good. I'm just like, it's so easy to mess up. Being a white man,
Yeah.
I find I don't even want to say too much. Like, I mean, I tried to talk to Jimmy Douglas about it a little bit, and it took me minutes to get a question out of my mouth because I couldn't even figure out what the hell to say, and so it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, but I think that it is something that needs to be discussed.
Yeah,
And
big time.
whether that's getting people to sign up and become members and getting more variety, but I think it's also
No, the much bigger systemic picture is huge.
Yeah, and the fact that we recognize it and that it's being talked about is super important.
Yeah.
But I mean, getting back to that, the woman is fucking amazing. Sorry, you can remove the fucking.
Why? That's like the 12th one you've said, so it's fine.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, the fucking mixed up shit, I think, was something that happened earlier. Yeah, there's plenty. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
There should be. There should be. So, well, there's lots of other stuff sort of in between, but let's talk about you deciding to base yourself in LA. Because we kind of glossed over the fact that, you went from all the stuff with Tommy in New York, and then all of a sudden you've got a place with multiple rooms in LA. So what was the impetus for doing it? What was going on in New York when you decided to actually spend more time in LA, enough to say you live there? I mean, obviously you still got a place in New York. I mean, you still have a place in New York, but you definitely live in LA now. So what was the deal?
I should have saw it coming, but I didn't. Everyone was moving to LA. Everybody from New York. Housing prices, and also just real estate in general. Hit Factory sold.
Yeah.
Closed. Sony sold, closed. There were at the time only a few rooms in Brooklyn that I remember, and they were okay. I rented a room at Chungking with Josh Deutsch from Downtown Music, and we shared a room, and then that studio closed. So places were just, the real estate market was so high that studios couldn't afford to be in business.
Yeah.
And of course, the music business was not able to afford a higher price for studio time. So it became obvious to me that having my own space was important. I had transitioned into, this hybrid system that I use. I had built a room upstate in my barn. So I got out of the city and started living upstate in the woods and working out of the barn. And I mixed the Jason Mraz
Well,
record.
you lived in a house. Let's be clear. You didn't live
I
in the
lived in a house,
woods.
and the barn was across the street. And I built a little studio. Built it by hand. Fran Manzella, rest in peace, actually came up and sketched on white line paper what I should do, and literally just drew it out by hand. We had dinner, and he went home, and I started, putting up, what do you call them? Baffle walls and framing and things like that, and the room just sounded amazing. It really did. I got lucky, and part of that is because I didn't have to keep sound in or out.
Right.
I wasn't recording, and I had no neighbors. So part of the reason why the room sounds so good is because it's not airtight.
Right.
So if you're, in the house in the middle of the night while I'm working, you can hear me working because I can't keep the sound in because I didn't try.
Right.
And as anybody who builds a room knows, that's why rooms don't sound good, because you build a room to keep the sound in and to keep the sound from outside coming in.
Right.
And if you don't care about those things, the air goes right through.
Yeah.
Then baffling is easy.
Yeah.
And low frequencies can leave and never come back.
Right.
And that's what my room did. And I mixed a bunch of things, but I think I mixed a Carrie Hilson track, was one of my first that I was like, oh, this is really working, And I had done some work for one of my producer friends, Craig Street, and that was coming out really good as well. What's her name? I'm going to forget her name. Gone. Okay.
Might come back.
Then I got asked to mix the Jason Mraz record, and I mixed it up there.
Yeah, well, we should talk about that a little bit before we move you to LA, because I mean, it's obviously with Stephen Street, that's going to be less of the R&B, hip hop, crossover pop stuff you'd been doing, but. So were you always trying to keep your hand in other genres, or you just, the work is coming, you're doing the work, you knew people? So how did the Jason Mraz album even come about? Because it wasn't an obvious fit at that point, was it?
No, I had worked with an amazing producer for many years, Martin Tereffi. And he is a Swedish dude who lives in London. He's got his own spot there called Kensington. And he and I had worked together on a number of records. And then he had brought me to Kensington, and I worked there on Craig David was the artist. And I got to meet Yusef, Cat Stevens, by the way.
Right.
Which was a huge, big thing for me.
Nice.
But anyway, so Martin and I had been working together quite a bit, and Martin was working on that, Jason record. And I had met Sam Rebeck, who was the A&R guy for the Jason record. I had also known about Jason because Josh Deutsch had originally either signed him or helped him, and Josh and I had shared the room at
right.
So Martin tried me out. I mean, Martin's a really thoughtful guy, and sort of, he stages his people whether it's the musicians involved or the engineers involved. And he works in a room at Kensington that's open, so no control room. And it's got the beautiful API console and great microphones, and a guy named Dear Gormson, I'm messing with the last name, did the engineering on that record. And so Martin, asked me to give it a try. So I did. And I had, at that point, my hybrid system was really working. And I had a bunch of analog gear, but I was doing everything in the box. So I was, it was exactly the system that I have here, which is, I just moved it from that barn and put it in this room, which is my Neve sidecar, my EMI Chandler mixer, bunch of Chandler EMI stuff, and it just came together really nicely, and it worked out perfect. And we did a few recalls. Craig Kalman, the president of Atlantic, came down, and so I literally recreated my setup at Looking Glass Studios down on Broadway. Was Looking Glass on Broadway?
I don't know.
I think it was.
Let's say it was. Who's going to argue? It'll be in the chat.
But that was Philip Glass's studio.
Right.
And so I replicated my setup there, which in those days was easy. My setup is not that hard. It's just, some interfaces and the particular gear that I needed for those, and then it's all calibrated, and boom, the mixes came back, and Craig Kalman sat next to me, and we went through tweaks and did recalls. And I think we did maybe recalls on 3 or 4 songs.
Right.
And I'm Yours, of course, was the most important. So we did recalls on them. And it went great. And I have to say, Dear's recording and Martin's production just made it happen, because it just was perfect. I mean, the vocal sound, Jason is also one of the best vocalists I have ever heard.
Wow.
And so between Dear's recording, Martin's production, and Jason's, performance, it just made my life easy.
You still did some stuff, though. It's a fantastic sounding record, and I think that it would be easy. It'd be easy for it to sound a little more singer-songwritery, which would then not make the arrangements work, because the arrangements really go for the more pop thing in a chorus, but then the verse is nothing, and there's a lot of contrast on that record, and I believe 1,000,000% that it's your ability to just let it live in the same world as all these other artists we talked about, who really have nothing to do with him, in a way. It's what makes that record work for me. So
yeah, I think the fact that I'm constantly working on different genres at the same time really is beneficial, because it forces me to even looking at my gear, I'm looking at, that was a setting for whatever the record was, that I was doing. And okay, I'm gonna keep that setting for the completely different record,
right?
And see what happens, and that's kind of fun and interesting, and creative. I mean, how it is. It's like you try this thing, whether it's in a piece of gear, analog gear, or a digital thing, and you put it on something completely different. It's so much fun to see where it takes you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the, as I said, Martin picks and chooses the people he works with based on, oh, a little of that flavor in this is going
Right.
to do that. And he was right.
Well,
And
it definitely worked on that record.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So awesome. All right. So are we moving you to LA yet, or we still got more upstate to do?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah. The funny thing was, you know, I drove across the country. I refused to put my gear in on a plane and let the gear folks, have at it. So
And this is
I
right about when we met, I think, because I met you right when you were sort of making the
yeah,
decision, like, yeah, it's
that's right.
time to come.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no hope for New York City at that point as far as studios go. I had asked every studio, of course. I called everyone. Can I have a room? And they'd be like, yeah, it's, whatever. The lowest rate they would give me would be 1,500 a day. And I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, I want the room for the year. And they'd be like,
Yeah,
yeah,
1,500 a day.
100 a day. And I'm like, no, no, you don't get it. Like, there's a whole new world coming. You can't be doing that. They're like, look, this is what we got, you know.
Right.
And I was like, you can remove everything. I don't need even the fucking speakers. Get them out of here. I don't need nothing. Just give me an empty room. And they were like, no, can't do it. So I was like, all right, knock yourself out. So I talked to a couple of friends of mine. I was like, anybody want to take a trip across the country? And one of my buddies, Zach, he was going to do it, Zach Hancock, and he had helped me build that room in the barn, and he was going to do it, but it didn't work out. So last minute, another buddy of mine jumped in, and I mean, that was just about the time GPS was happening and shit.
Right.
So like, dude had it all. Like, I didn't need
You're like,
GPS.
go west. You'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. But he had it, and it worked out well because we like stopped at good food places and
Oh, nice. Did you
did
do
it
the northern route or the southern route? Which way?
southern.
Nice.
Yeah, we went almost straight down and then banged a right. But you know, dragged that shit across the country myself. I didn't let it out of my sight. I backed the truck up to the wherever we were, whatever room, because I would crash at night. I wasn't going to
Right.
do it on the clock thing, but back the truck up to my door so that nobody could get in it. And if I heard anybody touch the truck, I'd like run out. But yeah, got across the country, and my friend Jean-Marie Horvat was kind of hunkered down at the Boom Boom Room, which was Will Smith's place at the time.
Right.
And so I shared a room with him for a while, and then eventually this spot opened up. I needed more time, so I started working here at night, and then the owner of the building, gave me another like a little room. So I did a little acoustic treatment on that. And then a couple of my friends moved in, one downstairs, one across the hall, another one at the front. So at one point we had 5 rooms.
Wow.
We don't, obviously I don't own the building. So we just rented what we needed, and I paid by the month, and it worked out perfect. And the room was weird because it was actually, I'm supposed to be facing that way.
Right.
But it didn't sound good. So 2 of my friends, Maurice from PMC Speakers,
Yeah.
and Ron Spider, who also now works for PMC, they kind of suggested I flip the room around, just literally, 180 degrees. And ever since then, that was 10 years ago. Ever since then, the room is performing really well.
And it's better. It's because when you're facing the other way, you got your back to the door, and all mafia people know you do not sit with your back to the door. I've seen The Godfather.
That's funny. Yeah, that's the whole reason why it sounds better.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
There's less fear in the room.
Less clear. Yeah. I feel really bad too because there was a Portugal Man record that I mixed facing that way, or I should say that I mixed one song of, and then they rejected me, and I was ready to burn the fucking place down, but then Maurice and Spider kind of were like, yeah, flip it around. So Justin actually flipped it around as a surprise for me, and I came in and man, performs really well.
That's all. Justin is that kind of guy. He probably did it overnight too, right? Knowing him.
I think it was a weekend, but
Yeah, but
yeah,
still.
better. Yeah.
Amazing. So, all right. So this starts the LA era.
Yeah.
And did Mirrorball start up as a thing right away, or was that later on?
Well, interestingly, Mirrorball kind of started because Martin Tereffi at Kinseltown, he had a production company, and Kinseltown was part of that system. And one of his partners was Sasha Skarbek. Sasha Skarbek's brother, Sasha Skarbek is a writer producer who was partners with Martin at the time. And his brother, Stefan, had just moved to LA from London, gotten married. And so we met up and we were like, oh, why don't we do like a Kinseltown West, you know, and create a system like they were doing, which was the sort of collaborative group kind of thing, which lots of producers of Martin's level do. You know, they pull in younger guys, they develop
Right.
them, and then those guys start doing productions and writing and things like that. So Steph and I thought, well, we should give this a go and see what happens. So that's kind of how it came up. And the name Mirrorball, just we happened to use it because Steph had created a company named Mirrorball. So we just used it because it's easier to use what you already got.
Yeah, exactly. I've had COR Productions since college for no good reason other than it existed.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what was your vision for it, and has it morphed into other things? And like, what's the idea? Because you love having a team, which
Yeah.
is admirable. I mean, because it means you're mentoring all the time, but you're also learning from other people. You're making sure there are other creative people around you, and that's not the way everybody works. So,
Yeah.
expound.
Well, I mean, a large part of it comes from, things that we talked about in the first part of this interview, which is, my earliest work as a professional was, I did live sound for a band called the Marcells that I think we talked about. Chris Rival got me involved in that, and that was a 10-piece band. And me and Chris did all the roadieing, all the live sound, the lights, everything. But, that was a 10-piece band that it was extremely collaborative. To then go from, that was in Boston, to then go to New York and work at Sigma Sound, where, we had monthly meetings with the engineering staff and the technical staff. And there were 6 techs.
Right.
I mean, studio has 6 techs. I mean, usually they have a part-time tech.
Exactly.
One
Yeah.
part-time tech now. We had 6 techs, and an engineering team of probably 10 people, and then there was a production team in the office of another 6 people. Those were the days.
Yeah.
And so collaboration was every second, because the client had to walk into a perfectly, put together facility with, everything from the catering to the microphones, and the tape machine had to be perfect. And I learned a lot from the people who taught me, and I watched that dwindle down because of money.
Right.
And and got to the point where, you know, I would walk into a studio and the assistants were not trained, and I don't blame them, and I don't even blame the studios. You know, it's just money.
Well, it's
Um,
that, and it's also I've many sessions you'd walk in and it was the first time in 8 months they'd actually used any channels on the console because everybody's just monitoring stereo. No one's setting
yeah,
up microphones.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah, it just wasn't that kind of work.
Yeah. So I, you know, I I started when I got here. I brought my assistant from upstate, literally from the woods. You know, I brought my assistant here because he was amazing. Mac Burkhart is his name, and he traveled across the country. He didn't travel in the truck with me, but he
Which
did.
shows he doesn't really have the dedication to
No,
hack
which
it.
was he's smart.
Oh, right. Yes, that's what I meant.
um, but he came out and he stayed for, I want to say he stayed for 3 or 4 months, you know, which was really nice of him. He didn't have to do that. And, you know, and then I looked for a replacement. And at that point, I had started right away. I was like, okay, Mac, you're going to leave. Thank you for the notice. You're going to help me find a new guy, you know? And he did. He you know, reached out on whatever device was hot at the time, and fucking whatever, you know, website was,
Yeah,
you know, possible. um and he
MySpace
brought
probably.
in, could have been, yeah, it could have
Yeah,
been. And he brought in like 5 guys for me to check out. And um and most of the guys showed up with mixing credits and bragged about this person they worked with, and, you know, this or that they were doing. And I was like, cool, why do you want to work for me? Like, you're already mixing, you know, you're already a star, knock yourself out. um, and then he brought in Justin, and Justin came in, and I was working with Robbie Robertson at the time. And Justin came in, and everyone started, and Mac was still there. So everyone was chatting, you know, with Mac as if he was the second engineer. And then Justin, they just started treating him as if he was part of the team immediately. And he started acting like he was part of the team. And he was just interviewing at that point.
right.
You know? So by the end of the interview, you know, which was probably 4 hours long, because he's there, like literally taking notes and
Right.
doing
Like, well,
things
I guess
immediately.
you're hired because you're working.
Yeah, and we were like, yeah, that's our due. And I'm not sure he spoke more than 10 sentences during those 4 hours, which again is perfect.
That's perfect. That's one of the things Jimmy Douglas said was like you walk into that room silent. You don't
Yeah,
walk in talking.
yeah. Everyone else had gobs of shit to say about themselves. Justin, I don't think I even knew his last name at that point. You know, I didn't ask him anything because I didn't have time. I was working.
Right.
He immediately was like, "Yeah, this guy is working already," and yeah, and he and I have been super tight since that day, and I still rely on him. I'm, you know, getting a new server, so I've got to make an adjustment so he can come in here socially distanced and by himself, and pop that server in, and like that. I still rely on him for a lot of really important things in my technical world.
Right. But you've also, I mean, Mirrorball is a full on like publishing company. You've signed artists. You have
Yeah.
put out. Now, are you a label or you've had the records put out through people?
No, no. So we started out as a production company, and first, mm, yeah, I don't do that as much anymore. Um, and from that, we moved into publishing because, you know, why not? If you can spot talent, why not?
Yeah.
Um, And and then, of course, if you're making music, releasing it is a good vehicle to test it. And so we made a distribution deal with The Orchard, and still have that. And uh, I've taken a back seat at this point since the baby was born. And I pulled in an amazing writer, executive talent, Johnny Davis, to sort of take over and run things. Stefan, my partner, also had 2 babies in this time. So we upstreamed the best of the talent to BMG songs and also UMPG, and our admin deal is through UMPG. So we kind of upstreamed a couple things there and upstreamed a couple things through BMG, and then as far as releasing, it's more specific,
right?
And more about how that works in the grand scheme of things. And I think Johnny is doing a great job at that aspect of it, because he's actually worked for bigger corporations than I have.
Right.
But
when you started, I mean, did you see yourself personally kind of branching out and maybe not just being a mixer, not just, but you know what I mean, sort of expanding your roles, and now you've decided to focus more just on the making records, or you just wanted this going on around you?
It kind of developed into doing more production, doing, talent development. We used to have meetings with all the writers. And in fact, some of the writers got together in those meetings and then became artists that got signed to labels as well. I mean, I think in the end, what I've realized and what I've proven to myself is that I'm good at picking talent, and not just writers, producers, singers, things like that, but engineers. And the engineering talent that I've been lucky enough to work with, starting with Justin and Mac, but also a guy named James Krause and John Castelli and Chris Tabron, Tyler Scott, and now Miles Komisky and Najib are still kind of one foot out the door, but still working with me. And one of my earliest apprentices, Zach Hancock, is still working with me.
Right.
But all, doing well and making their own livings, and we still love hanging out, and even, like I send music to them and they send music to me. Can you put your ear on this? Send me some notes, because I'm having problems with it, or, hey, have you tried this plugin? Check it out. Those kinds of things. So I've been very, very lucky in that regard. But that's what I've realized, is that I'm good at picking talent. I might not be so good at, selling once I've chosen the great talent.
Yeah, I mean, other than Tommy Mottola, and that's so hard. It's just ridiculous. But it's all, obviously it's a testament to you, the legacy of the people you've got working with you, who then go on to do things, and it's, you're definitely a part of that, which is great.
Yeah,
it's really good. So there's lots and lots of records. Like we mentioned Christina Aguilera for about a second and a half, but I don't want to just like, oh, what about this artist? What about this artist? What about this artist? But we got to talk about Blurred Lines for a bit.
Yeah.
Don't we? A little?
I mean,
your role in it was not as controversial as everything else that happened, but
as much as the drama surrounding it, it's a great record. Pharrell doesn't plagiarize, and he's an amazing talent. And Andrew, can't remember his last name, who recorded it, delivered it to me in perfect shape. So as far as the story about the mix, it was an easy mix.
I mean, you'd done a lot of stuff with Robin already, though, at that point,
I
right?
had,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, Rob came into the studio all the time, and you know, I I like Rob, and I like Pharrell, and I consider them to be friends, and so I'm heartbroken over the bullshit
Yeah, I mean,
involved.
I'm more talking about just how fucking huge it was. I mean, that was like
Yeah,
there hadn't. I don't know. I'm probably wrong, but it felt like there hadn't been a song that took over in that way for a long time.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
talk about the feel good hit of the summer, but then it turns out half the people in the world have never even heard of it, even before the controversy. And
Yeah.
obviously, video full of naked chicks doesn't hurt, but that song just owned the world as far as the world we were looking at that
Yeah.
point. And it sounded amazing. It had, again, I think in almost the same way, but completely sort of the inside out version of the Jason Mraz thing. It had, like on the Jason Mraz, I feel like you almost brought more of a pop thing to it that it didn't necessarily have. And in
Mhm.
Blurred Lines, it's almost the other way. It got a little bit dirtier, a little bit
Yeah.
more the New York earlier hip
Yeah.
hop stuff that you'd done. You brought that to it. I mean, the bottom end on that track is just insane.
Yeah.
So,
No, no, I think that's absolutely true. It's actually closer to one thing
right.
that think that Jason Mraz. You know what I mean? Like I pulled from one thing because um, Pharrell is meticulous about his percussion. Um, and that song is pretty much all percussion.
Yeah. It's percussion and party tracks.
Yeah, there's not a lot of shit. It's Pharrell and it's Pharrell doing everything, and then Rob singing, and but uh, so mixing wise, that's just going with the flow of whatever Pharrell did and pulling in that sort of that thing that Rich Harrison did as well on the one thing and those records for A. Marie. Um, and just maybe modernizing it slightly, a touch more top end than A. Marie, but really it was a layup. I mean, between what Pharrell did and what Andrew did,
And
they just,
did you reference one thing, like actually listen to it to check it out, or you just
that's
remembering?
it's possible. I don't remember doing that. I remember the vibe in the room when that was being played. And at the time, Justin and James were both here on a daily basis, and John was across the hall, and I don't know if Tab was here, but you know, um, everybody was flipping out,
Right.
and we had worked a lot with Rob, and we all love Rob because he's an amazing vocalist, um, and and he's just a character. He just commands attention in a really interesting way. Um, but that song, just everybody was perked up and
So you knew it was something special.
oh yeah,
Just yeah.
and there was, I mean, that's a 6 hour mix with maybe 4 hours of notes, um, and those 4 hours of notes are, an hour here, couple hours there.
Right.
It was like
Easy.
Pharrell sending me notes, try this, do that, reapproach this, that kind of thing. So all in all, not a hard mix, but I think just in my lane, really.
And I should know this, but had you done a lot of stuff with Pharrell before this?
I had he and I had worked together a couple times on several things, and and it's slipping my mind right now on what that was.
Right.
But
So that, but it wasn't the
no, it wasn't
first
the
time.
first time we worked together. Um, and he's also, he's kind of like in a similar way to Rich Harrison, and he really lets you do your thing. And he's got several most important bits. Don't mess with him on those bits, and then do your thing on the rest. And then he'll either like it or not, and he'll push you in some other direction if he doesn't.
And do you get told what those bits are, or it's just like when you pull up the track, it's kind
Afterward.
of okay? Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right.
Am I told which bits don't
Yeah,
mess with?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And that could be the snare drum, or that could be, the delay on this, or whatever
Right.
it is. And there's 3 or 4 bits that don't mess with those. Anything else you want to do is worth a try. And because I think in the same way that Rich Harrison does, he's picking and choosing the people he wants to work with based on what he knows of them and what he likes about them.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, we can. If there's anything in particular you wanted to talk, because there's obviously Pink stuff. It just sounds incredible. Lady Gaga stuff sounds amazing. But there are a couple that are just maybe slightly more off your beaten path. One, it's not that far off, but the Fits and the Tantrums record. But then also there's some Weezer in there.
The
So
song, that was
yeah, one song. But I mean, well, how'd that come about? Like, what's the deal with that?
uh, I think it was one of those. I can't remember what the backstory was completely. It was for a movie or something. It wasn't for their album, and the co-writer producer I had actually met, and of course it's blanking, and I should have prepared myself better, but not.
It's
I think
all you had to
it's
do was live the life. There's no preparation going on here.
well, I he and I really got on well when we met before that record was done. I think we met at a Grammy event or something, and super cool guy, and I am going to find his name, but I think between him and the manager, they were like, let's this is one where we need it to be more pop or more, me, and let's throw it to Maz and give it a try. And everybody on board was happy about that idea. I think the only people who weren't happy were Weezer fans, basically.
Yeah, well, I can almost guarantee you that Rivers knows exactly who you are because he is a gigantic pop fan. He
Okay.
loves pop songs. He just wants
Okay.
to play them loud and distorted. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
all about songs, all
Yeah.
about pop, R&B. Yeah. So I
So
can imagine he would have been pretty psyched about that.
okay. Yeah, and I think it was one of those things that worked for that moment, and it worked for that song. And they were so nice, and they let me do whatever I wanted, and their comments were spot on. And even when I did stupid things, they weren't mad. But it did take a while to get it right, and I think that um, but I was amazed at how well it all worked with everyone involved. There was no, the manager wants this and I don't like that. Or there was none of that bullshit. It was all like, this is going in the right direction. Tweak these things, get them to be a little more like this. But they didn't try to, force me to make it sound like their other records, because I
Right.
knew they were coming to me
For
because
something
they didn't
else.
need to. Yeah, they wanted something else. They weren't coming to me for their record. I knew that this was a one-off. I wasn't getting an album from Weezer.
Well, you never know. But I think it's an interesting thing about songs for films, because usually the people who mess with it are the film people, but on the music side, it's always by far the most relaxed you'll ever get with an artist, because it's not the pressure of the next record. It's not this entire career trajectory thing. It's like out of the blue, like, oh, hey, we're going to do a song for a movie. It's usually like this one, a collaboration with somebody, which is not something they'd normally do. They can kind of go outside of their comfort zone and just see what happens. And it won't matter. And sometimes, these are one-offs that don't really go anywhere. And other times it's like that track, or the Chili Peppers Love Roller Coaster, something where it becomes part of the canon for the artist, but there isn't that pressure on it, which is great. It creatively makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think that, it's one of the interesting things about our business, in that, we become friends, but we do very different things. But then when I'm working on a B thing and I'm like thinking, oh, I need help, I can call you and you do you, but you also do me, and it's kind of cool. And I think that, we all do a similar thing, I think. And I think that one of the lucky things that I've always felt about my career is that I have been around like true professionals most of the time. There are those, occasions where you're like, I just, hope I never see this guy again. But for the most part, working with professionals is amazing, because you don't need a lot of communication to get to this beautiful creative place. A lot of times it's, okay, they usually call Mick, like we were talking about with Tommy. Okay, obviously he's calling me, not because he wants me to make it sound like Mick, but because he wants maybe a little Mick in there, but then he wants whatever he thinks I am. Do you know what I mean? And what does he think I am? Does he think I'm Mary J, or does he think I'm big, or does he think I'm, full force? I'm sure. You know what I'm saying? So I think, but as also a professional person, I'm adding that all up whenever I get a phone call from someone. And I think that's the super cool thing about our business, is that everyone is staging. And, when Martin calls me, I know that he's thinking 4 moves down the road of how this is going to work. And, my ability to communicate with this guy is going to make this work for him. And, and all of this is kind of how our business works. I think also, even at the level of A&R and management, and how they're thinking about things, and staging records is really smart. And we, as the technical people, have to make sure that we consider all of that as well. I mean, they're not going to come out and say, yeah, can you make it sound like Mick, or make it, or make it sound like Andrew Scheps? They're not going to say that. But I know that that's in the lexicon of what their brain is doing when they bring me something that's not typically me. And I know that I have to pay attention to that. And they're appreciative of me acknowledging it, whether it's through my work or even verbally.
Right.
And I think that, some of that communication is part of learning and growing. And it is what helps you become a professional and helps you become widely accepted.
Yeah, I think it's easy to sort of feel like, mixers have got a style, and obviously we all hear things differently, but it's also the weirdest things that happen at the beginning of a mix can completely inform where that mix ends up. And it might be completely different from if that little thing didn't happen. Like for me, a lot of times it'll be something someone's written in the comments. And all of a sudden that element will become way more important than it would have been if no one had bothered to write in the comments about it. And
Yeah.
then like that informs everything. And if I mixed it the next day from scratch, it'd sound totally different.
Yeah.
But within the aesthetic, that is whatever it is. So I think that is the thing. It's that no matter where you go, it will always be you, but it might be with something else in mind.
Hmm.
That in a way, like the whole doing it for a film for the artist frees them up. I'm going to go down a slightly different path. Like I'm not just stuck with me on this one. I'm going to think about what someone else might do or what they might focus on. And it kind of it frees you up in a way by making you do something different, which is cool.
Yeah. 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 I agree. Yeah. I'm just, my brain is sort of going through all the connections involved in records that we're talking about, and remembering, you know, the thing, as technicians or as more technical creative people that we are, we don't always think about things. You know, when I think about creativity, I'm thinking about guitar arrangement, percussion, volumes, and gluing this and making this, arrangement work and things like that. But when you're at the level of a manager or label executive, um, um, and certainly sometimes an artist, um, the creative sphere is a much bigger thing. I was just thinking about the Pharrell and Rob record, and remembering Neil Jacobson, who's an executive at Universal, had put me together with Pharrell as well. But my manager also, at the time, my manager had become friends with Neil, and the conversations that they had creatively, they're in their mind, that's their creative conversation. Like, wouldn't it be great if Tone did this with,
Right.
and then that, and then you put these two people in a room together and you get this, and I think that this is also this underlying thing that continues. It's part of the continuum of our music business. We were talking about Tommy and him pulling in track masters or Puffy and or Corey, my friend Corey, and that's him being creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know that, and then the artist says, "Oh yeah," and then why don't we pull this guy in to do the recording, and all of these kind of creative things work out, and then there it is. So then you get then you get a smash record,
Right.
and and you and I are sitting here talking about how I EQ the vocal.
Well,
You know what I
it's
mean?
why I'm trying not to talk about the EQ, but it's true because it's also when you're doing what we do, it can be hard to remember that side of it because you feel like there's people who come in and they walk in and they say something that's half an idea and then they leave. And you're like, well, yeah, but now I got to do it. And you're the one pushing the buttons and making it happen and all that. And you can almost resent their creative input. But if they hadn't said it, you wouldn't be doing it because you never would have thought of it. And
Yeah,
it takes all of it. It definitely does. And there's nobody who can do all levels of that creativity at the same time. So
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
good way to look at it. You got to be more generous about that sometimes. Because man, can we complain some. I mean, not even you, but just me. I can certainly complain about stuff. But, it's as long as it's serving the art, it doesn't matter what it is or who it's coming from and, what form it takes.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And you know as well as I do that sometimes production is not being nicey. Sometimes production is like shoveling in a bunch of shit and making some chaos happen because you think you're going to get this kernel of lovely creativity to happen for this moment in the song. And I've never been as good at that. And maybe that's why I just mix and do less production.
Well, there are lots of production styles too. I mean, and there's some people who would argue that you won't get a good performance till you get people riled up, or you haven't done your job if nobody's crying, or
Right,
like.
right.
But that's, I mean, I just can't on a personal level. I just can't do that. I'd be apologizing as soon as I said anything to
Yeah.
try and go in that direction. It's just not who I am as a person. But I've seen lots of producers who don't work that way. But it can be the exact same thing about making people comfortable enough to do stuff as opposed to making them uncomfortable. Either way
Yeah.
can work, and has been proven to work. But I think it's the ability to never think about what it's going to take to accomplish something, because that could put you off the idea. Like, wow, that's going to be hard. And as soon
Mm,
as you've thought that, you've lost, because it
yeah.
doesn't matter if it's hard or easy, or, it's amazing when, like, the Pharrell track just comes together. Woohoo! It's done. But there are other things you've done that are just as successful that I'm sure have taken a ridiculous amount of time. You're pulling it through a keyhole to get it there.
Yep. Definitely.
So you said once in an interview, which was, and I've heard this a couple of times from you, and it's an interesting concept. I think while we're not just like, what'd you do on this record? To run your career like a business. And that's like a real concept of yours. And I have a feeling the people watching this might not mind if you sort of gave your explanation of what you mean by that and how you actually put it into practice, because it's pretty interesting.
Well, when I say run it like a business, I mean, um, every business makes decisions about um, their income, right? So quarter to quarter income, and I don't mean during COVID. I mean
Yeah,
you know
normal
in your
world.
normal period, but you have to say, okay, did we how did we do quarter one of 2019 and quarter one of 2018, and were those numbers in our business, if my numbers are you know close, I'm happy. I don't feel like I need to, I don't know that I can make double or even 25% more at this point in my career because I get paid a certain amount of money. There are only a certain number of days in the year. I technically work by the hour. I'm not a salaried, performer. I work by the hour. And if there are no more hours in the day, that's it. I'm
Right.
not going to make much more money. So, you know, um, but as a young person, what I did was say, okay, in, like my first manager, I said to her,
Exactly. He was just thinking about that.
you know, if I hire you, I want to make 25% more this year than I made last year. And, she knocked it out the park. I made 50% more, you know? Um, and, I have my sister as my bookkeeper. I've never been able to give that to a stranger. So my sister is my bookkeeper. So every year, my sister does, a rundown. Here's where we were 2017. Here's where we are quarter by quarter 2018. And then, this year in July, she sent me a comparison of at this point last year and at this point this year. This is where we're at. Um, Now, that's just numbers. Those are just numbers, but it's also, you have to include everything in that, right? So, because, and I'm talking about just income. I'm not talking about expenses. Because one of the things that I try to teach, whether I'm teaching, a seminar or whether I'm teaching my apprentices, one of the things I try to teach them is I have seen many people fail in this business. And one of the easiest ways to determine if you are good at this is that if people pay you. And I can attest to that because people have paid me to do this job for a good many years. Now, have I had low periods? Yes. And what I look at in those low periods is, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to change? Either what is stagnant and needs to be upgraded, whether it be equipment or attitude or bringing in a new apprentice, or getting a bunch of new software. I don't know, but I have analyzed, performance of myself and my business in that way. And I think that all students should do that because, generally kids are taught like, oh, you can do anything you want in life.
Right.
And I'm sorry, it's just not true. It's just not. If you're not getting work, it's because you're not good enough. I'm sorry. And that doesn't mean that you're not good enough with the technology.
Right. Yeah, you're not good enough at something though.
Something is missing. Because you just might not be good enough at interpreting what somebody's looking for. You might not be good enough. You know what? They might not like the way you eat. I don't know what it is, but this is to be successful. It takes a lot of different things. You and I just don't sit here and tweak knobs. We communicate, we interpret, we make people feel comfortable with the way that we speak. We put our sentences together in a way that they understand. There are all these things. And we run our business in a way that works for us so that when someone calls and asks for a favor, we're like, oh yeah, dude, whatever that is, we put it together in a way that makes our business work so that we can do a variety of things within the structure of our business, and we communicate in a way that makes our clients happy. Now, I know, and many people who have, whether they started at the same time as you, that are no longer doing it, or they have diverted to something else. That happens.
Yeah.
And all I can say there, I have maybe a couple friends in particular who have been trying to do this for too long. And I try to be honest with them, like, maybe you should get into something else. Maybe do something else. You're really good at this. Do that, maybe. And that's what I say to my close friends. My apprentices or my students, I'll be bluntly honest with them. I have had apprentices or wannabe apprentices in this room who I've said to, you talk too much. So you need to fix that. And now you can go.
Right.
And go fix that and go work. I've had one guy came here and I was like, you have a lot of opinions. I think you'd be a better manager. And I've also had people who, who have been great at engineering, but I just didn't want to be in a room with them.
Right.
And no one is willing to look at themselves in this way.
No, it's such a random profession, seemingly, that it's very easy to blame it on luck. Everything is to do with luck, and that's why you're not working is bad luck. And,
or there's that guy dislikes me.
Yeah, and look, it might be true, but I love that you've got to hold yourself accountable for what's going on in your life, no matter if it's your fault or not. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You're the one living the life, and this is what's going on. And also, I love the fact that it's about setting goals with time limits on them to reassess that goal. And you can come back and reassess it and say, that was a stupid goal. forget it.
Yeah, that's right.
New goal. But not just, I'm going to hit my head against this wall until I die, blaming other people for why there's a wall here in the first place.
Right. Yeah, and I think the numbers help. You know, when you know, when people or friends have come to me and been like, I'm just not working. I can't get to work. I don't know what's going on. You have to look at the numbers and realize either you are doing something wrong or you are consistently doing something wrong. I mean, I've been lucky enough to okay, these numbers are not good. Let me make some changes. And that those changes have been everything, as I mentioned, whether it's gear or how I communicate or where I work or whatever it is. But if you are consistently not getting work, there are some real systemic problems in what you're doing. And you really need to evaluate them dramatically. And some of that, clients aren't going to tell you what the problem is.
No, they don't.
And your friends aren't going to tell you what the problem is generally. My partner, Steph, sometimes calls me the dream killer because, I try to be honest with people. They come in here, they've got a dream. I had one woman who, she brought her music into me, I'm going to say 5 years ago. And then, 2 years later, she brings in music, and I give her comments or whatever. 2 years later, she comes in with something that is still nowhere near good enough. And then another 2 years, or a year later, she brings in some more stuff. And I'll finally I'll be like, and at this point now I know her a little bit. And at this point I'll say to her, you know what? I don't think you're good enough. I don't hear it in what you're writing or what you're performing or whatever's happening. You're not good enough. But what I know of you now is that you are really good at these things. Like you're great at organizing people and talking to people and, creating environments and friend collectives and things like that. Why don't you be a manager?
Yeah, artist management. You just described it.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? Because you're really good at people love you, but this is never going to happen for you. And you're wasting your energy and your talent, your God-given talent of like, you remember everybody's name. I can't fucking remember a person's name after they've given it to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the one thing a manager should be able to do is remember names. Like for years, they remember names.
Yeah.
And so, I've done that to other people. I had a woman came in, she was going to be my, personal assistant, executive assistant. And she wanted to be an artist. And I was like, oh, okay. Not what I was looking for, but okay. And then to come to find out she's 22, she's never written more than one song. And, and I'm just like, and she had a degree and a job and she quit. And I was like, you think Beyonce just woke up one day and was Beyonce? She started when she was probably 6.
Yeah.
Talent is, I mean, sure, there's
always the core of the super talent, but it doesn't just, you don't just get out of bed and there it is.
I mean, even the super talent works their ass off.
Yeah.
For most of their life. Sure, there's, I don't know, Serge Gainsbourg who just parties and then, wakes up in the studio and makes a record and people love it. And I'm sure that there are those people, but most people who are successful in this business have given blood and guts to the point where then they get, if they're lucky, they get a little payback, you know? That'd be like me and you saying, we're going to be actors now. You want to act, don't you? You know, and
Yeah.
then we're going
I'm going to have my own interview show. What do you think?
yeah, we're gonna try and do this. you know,
Yeah,
it's
look, I'm not getting on late night TV anytime
yeah,
soon.
exactly. It's
You know,
just yeah, you know, it's there's a lot of work that goes into it,
well,
but
but I really think that, what you're doing, okay, you're the dream killer, maybe, but pointing out to people what they're good at is something that actually needs to be done, because the thing that they're good at comes so naturally. They don't recognize that as that they're better than everyone else. They just think, oh, well, that's easy, instead of
exactly,
actually embracing it.
exactly.
And, I mean, I've got some talent in my mixing, but none of it comes easily. And it takes me a huge amount of time and blah, blah, blah. Whereas, like, I can talk to people. So, okay, maybe I should be doing this instead, because it would be a hell of a lot easier. But people don't want to pay to have me talk to them. So that's not going to happen. But
Right.
it's got to be
I
really useful. And hopefully a lot of the people you're telling this to are actually taking it to heart, because it's of course they're getting some of the best advice they'll ever get in the middle of a conversation that is the hardest thing they've ever had to hear about themselves, even though it
yeah.
has the really useful constructive stuff in it. But I mean, have any of these people sort of like embraced it and gone on and kind of
There was a guy in France at La Fabrique and Mix with the Masters who he played me his stuff and it had lots of problems. And that happens, of course. And sometimes that's just the room or the speakers.
Portugal the man? I mean,
I'm blaming that on the room.
it's the room.
Um, but we chatted and I got to know him a little bit and found out like he builds his own gear and he's got an electrical engineering degree and blah 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 blah. And come to find out, he's built gear for people and they love it and blah. And I was just like, wait, what? Huh? Like, you do this?
Right.
Like that's the gig. What? Why would you, why do you disregard the thing that you're really freaking good at to go and do something that is really hard to make money at? And there's like, you're in a room full of, you're 14 people in this room who want to do it.
Yeah.
As well as the thousands of people every year that think they are it. And, it's like, you've got this gift, do this thing, and he actually he had sort of shifted his life and is doing that. And through another friend from Mix with the Masters, in that seminar, I found out that he's actually doing really well.
Great.
And building gear, repairing gear, and designing gear, which is awesome, man.
Yeah, that takes a
I'm a
special
product
talent.
of it. I am a product of this idea of being told honestly whether or not you're fucking any good.
Right. Yeah. Stop playing
I am a
guitar,
product.
Tony.
Yes. Stop playing guitar. You suck at it. But also, even throughout, my years as an assistant, being told, like, what are you doing here? Like, this method is not going to work. So in other words, my editing myself and what I'm strong at, what I'm not
Right.
strong.
Which is an important point, because it's not necessarily like, if it's not working out, go do something totally different. But you need to assess and figure out if it's a small tweak within the thing, or if you really are going down the wrong road.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that I try to be honest with young people, because this is not an easy life. I mean, even people who want to be artists as well.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult thing, and I consider it a gift that I've had success, and I treasure it every day, and that's why I'm so diligent at Oh, am I doing good? Oh, you know, have I listened to Justin when he tells me I'm doing something wrong, or there's a better method, or whoever it is that talks to me about my methodology or my
Well,
technique.
I know we said Justin's a really nice guy, but he's kind of a dick like that, isn't he? Totally kidding. There's absolutely nothing about Justin that's a dick. Like
Oh,
he's
that's not true. He's
oh
very firm. Yes, he's very
well,
firm
but is he being a
with
dick?
younger people, and even with me. He will be firm with me,
All right,
and
all right.
it's fine quality. There's nothing wrong
Well,
with it.
with Justin, if he says it, he's right.
Well, we used to have this thing about Justin because
Don't worry, he
he
can't hear you. I'm sure he's not watching.
I'm positive he's not. Already heard all this, but he was never a big talker ever. But he actually continued to work with me on the Robbie Robertson stuff, and from even that early time, he would just throw out the one perfect, ball. It was just, we'd all be talking and joking and, jiving and, everybody trying to outwit each other. And Justin would just lob this perfect,
Yeah,
whether it's a one-liner or a joke or full-on, discussion about, something in the speakers that we're working on, whatever it was, and there wouldn't be anything else, just that one. And we'd all just sit back and go, killed it. That was it. Justin, you're absolutely right. That's it. And he would do that consistently all the time. And it wasn't like he would been thinking about it over and over. It
no, no,
just perfect. Boom.
yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
But
He's the epitome of if you don't have something worth saying, don't say anything, and then he's got something worth saying.
yeah. And there are times that they're just gems. I wish I had them on tape because they were that good. Really, really just gems. And Robbie Robertson, doesn't matter who's in the room.
Right.
Could be the biggest star, just lobs one over and everybody's like, oh my God, that's the best. Either diffuses a tense situation or, totally illuminates what the actual problem is in the mix, or is just a joke,
Right.
like a straight up impressive joke. And you just like, it just makes the whole room go, oh my God, I'm so glad this guy's in the room.
Right. And that's the gig.
Yeah, that's the fucking gig. That is the gig. The people hiring us want to make sure, want to believe that we're the right person to be in the fucking room with them.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. Anyway.
There you go.
Did we get anything done?
Did we get anything done? I don't know. We didn't mention the Dandy Warhols yet.
Dandy Warhols.
Yeah, Fits and the Tantrums, didn't talk about them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but look, like I say, we could do that, but it just feels like me going. It's like the Chris Farley interviews where it's like, so you worked with Weezer. What was that like? That was cool, huh? So we could just open this up to some questions. We can get Mark in here and get some questions from the people.
They're all about questions.
So let's do that. Enough of me blabbing. And I love this last chunk because I think it's really useful. You've got to learn how to think about your own career. And that goes for me as much as someone who's just starting out, because one of the questions that'll always come up, and maybe it's in this chat, is like, what advice would you give to someone starting out? And the advice is to just be honest with yourself at all times, really.
Yeah.
Because you can't predict what the situation's going to be.
My guys often will talk about, buying gear. And that's one of those that you and I have probably both been, at times in our lives, not smart about. I mean, now I don't buy gear, man, unless it's going to make me money. I don't buy gear.
Well, see, I was always fiscally terrified, which is why almost all my gear was vintage. Like I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I just couldn't make myself do it. I don't know if it's smart or scared, but there's tons of new stuff that I completely missed out on because I just wouldn't buy it. But oh yeah, I mean, look, I'm sitting next to a gigantic modular synth that really doesn't get switched on that much, but it's cool and I love it.
Yeah.
So
I've got a couple of those choice ones that'll never leave me, no matter what. But that's a nostalgia thing in some ways, and also just a pride thing. But I've had gear like just what I haven't turned that thing on in 3 years, man.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, if it doesn't get used, it's gone.
Right.
Got to make me money.
So don't buy gear, kids. That's what we're saying.
It's like, the question is, what do I buy? Do I buy the mic pre, or do I buy the EQ, or, what do I buy first? And everyone asks me that question, but I which mic pre is going to make you the most money? That's
Well, yeah. I mean, look, if you want to buy it because you think it's great, that's cool. But it really, then you're buying it the same way someone who's nowhere near the business buying it is buying it. Your answer is exactly it. Which mic pre is going to make you more money? That's a work decision. Yeah. And that's the way you have to answer a question about, I want to be better at this job, so what do I buy?
Yeah.
Not, well, the Neve's got the warm sound. It's like, are you going to make money because you got a Neve? Or is it not going to make a difference at all?
Yeah.
You want to plug right into the back of your Apollo and it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and the gear is awesome. I love it. But, having almost none of it left, it's like I'm missing it. It is just gear. Anyway, we don't have to go down that path too deeply. But should we get Mark in here and get some questions from people who actually have questions?
Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Hey, Mark.
How's it going?
Good.
This has been fascinating, guys.
It's good. It's weird doing a part 2 because, like, when it's all in one, it's like right from the beginning, you plow through. Whereas now I've had time, went back and watched a little bit of what we'd already done. Like, we don't need to. I'm glad we got on to just some more philosophy stuff.
Yes.
And big picture stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I like your Chris Farley reference as well.
Because that's me, except I'm not nearly as funny.
Beyonce, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Tony, kind of the same thing as last time. We have this platform called Crowdcast where the main chat room is, and people submit their questions, and then they vote each other's up and all that stuff. So you just start with the most voted question and go right through them.
He's checking email right now, though. So.
Oh, you know what?
Okay.
I promised that I would find the writer producer of the Weezer thing. Johnny.
All right.
So.
Sorry, who is it?
To mention that, Johnny Kaufman.
Nice. Cool.
There you go.
Doing your own research.
I'm ready. Whatever you guys tell me to do. You're going to read the question.
Okay.
Mark's going to read some questions.
Okay. So this question comes from Joaquin, and he says, how do you approach very dynamic vocals? Example, singer with incredibly powerful voice from almost silent to very loud, or pop classical crossovers? How would you keep the vocal consistent but not crush it?
Pop classical or pop classic crossover?
Pop classical crossover.
Just like super dynamic. I mean, we talk about Christina Aguilera, really.
Yeah. So a lot of work is involved in a very dynamic vocal. In fact, I'm working with somebody right now who is very dynamic. And the way that I deal with it is, I'll try to make this short and sweet. One, I have to automate EQ because, if you're in a low section and either it's a lower range of the vocal or just let's say the verse is closer to the mic, say, and sort of more, a lower section, and he's not blowing, and then he makes it to the chorus where he is, well, his throat is going to change, and that's going to change the EQ. Even if he's using the same microphone, his throat is going to change. and you need to you need to adjust your EQ. Obviously, in the verse, you're probably going to take out a little bit of the lows, maybe the low mids, and control that more either with a multiband compressor or automating the EQ. And then when he gets into the spot where he's squeezing his throat and pushing harder, you're going to allow some of that low frequency back into the EQ, or change the threshold of the multiband compressor, depending on which one you're using. And you're going to change your upper frequencies as well, because when he's singing lower, you're going to reduce some of the bottom end and push maybe a little bit of top. And then when he gets harder, you're going to maybe reduce a little bit of the higher mids and push the bottom in the EQ. That's one thing. Then there's also parallel EQ, which the master of parallel EQ is here with parallel particles, right?
Parallel compression, yeah. I don't know.
And did I say parallel EQ? Yeah. I meant parallel compression. That I'm massaging that, riding that, so that you never really want to hear too much parallel compression. You want it to be used in a way where you never lose the vocal, and you decide where that vocal is sitting, whether it's super close to the listener or further back. Because as the vocalist is pushing hard in the chorus, you're going to be pushing, obviously reverb is you're going to get more reverb. So you want to bring up that parallel compressor so that you don't lose the positioning of the vocalist, right? So that's the minute and a half version of what I do. But it is a lot of massaging, and it's a lot of work to get that right. And then there are those vocalists who are just amazing singers and have great mic technique, who you slap an LA2A on there and boom, you're done.
Right.
As I had said, Jason Mraz is one of those, and B actually is one of those as well. I mean, I could put an RS-124 on B and maybe a little bit of top end EQ here and there, or automating the EQ, and done, depending on the song, of course. Yeah. So
nice.
Yeah, great answer. Okay, our next question is from Chiao Carvalho, and he asks, tips on having a huge reverb but keeping the vocals in your face. Kind of might have answered this. When it sounds like the reverb and delays are only in the back and not on the vocal.
Again, quick answer: automate your pre-delay on the voice. That'll help. Obviously, automate and ride your parallel compression. And I add and take away reverbs depending on what section I'm in. So I'll ride reverb, my long reverb or my short reverb, I'll ride them separately throughout the mix so that, that riding feels the way I want it to feel, but I'm hoping that it feels natural. Obviously nothing that comes out of the speakers is natural, right? Unless you're recording a jazz band and everybody's playing at the same time and they're in the same room and all the mics, there's nothing natural. It's like a movie, the footsteps are some guy with high heels on in a Foley room, right? It's the same thing with making records.
Wait, what? You've just ruined movies for me.
Every time he hears footsteps now, he's going to imagine a guy with high heels on.
I'm going to imagine you with high heels.
That's right, me with high heels. I almost booked a room by the month, an old Foley room, and I was like, "This would be awesome, man. We could just put footsteps and cool sound effects in our records." Anyway, but yeah, I'm trying to make it sound natural in an environment that is not. and I'm doing anything I can, and that is riding different kinds of EQs. I might use a a church for one thing, which is more stone, and then I might use a more woody thing for another section of the song. Obviously, making it sound as natural transitionally. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, Joaquin just put in the chat, he says, I could cry right now. This is so helpful. Thanks for that 1.5 minutes of gold. So,
great. Well, don't cry. Don't cry.
Unless I killed his dream.
Well, no, right. That's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good one from Alejandro Alvarez. He asks, did you ever want to quit in your early days? And how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, this is no different, than being an artist. Every artist wants to quit. Every artist wants to give up. Every artist wants to jump off a cliff. That is part of our job. And I'm sure, Andrew, you feel very well. You've had children for a very long time, so you don't want to kill yourself. But
no, but you contemplate. I mean, and not being flippant about it, but yeah, it's brutal.
It is brutal. Being, I don't think of myself necessarily every day as an artist, but we are, and being an artist is a very difficult lifestyle, and we are being scrutinized every minute of every day, and that wears on you, even today. So it's a tough life.
Yeah, and I think for me, especially in the first third where there's not much going on and you're really trying to work it out, the motivation is just, well, what would I be doing otherwise? And I actually took other jobs. I mean, I was a tech at a studio for 3 days and gave my 2 weeks notice when I got off the road because I was touring, and I can't do that anymore. But I knew all I wanted to do was make records, and fortunately banged at it hard enough, and obviously a little bit of talent in there, whatever, to be able to do it. But yeah, I mean, it was thinking about what the alternative was. But I think what Tony was saying before goes into this, though, is that if that doesn't motivate you as much as it needs to get through the horrible shit, then go do something else. Because, I mean, what a gift if you can say, you know what, I'm just going to work with my friend's band, who I think is awesome, but I don't have to make a living at this. Or I'm going to write songs to just go play in open mic nights because I really enjoy that and I love writing songs, but I'm no longer going to try and get over the hump of this, especially when someone who knows as much as someone like Tony is saying, I don't think it's there. If you can accept that and it works for you, that's amazing. And if you absolutely cannot accept it, well, there's your motivation, and you're going to have that every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a it is a difficult lifestyle, and you've got to reckon with it, and I think that I go in and out of reckoning. There are definitely days when I'm like, fuck this, I'm out, yeah, so it's a tough one.
Yeah. It's it may not be the most positive thing, but it's actually, well, one, thanks for humanizing it a little bit, and it's kind of a good thing to hear that even on the level that you guys are at, you also struggle with that.
Oh, absolutely. But it's I think you're a great example of someone who deals with it really well. Instead of sitting home and being a mixer, but you're still working your way up and just well, it's not happening yet. How come not blah, blah, blah. You found other things to do. And and the stuff you're doing at Puremix is amazing. And all of that is helping you with the actual mixing part. So diversifying isn't giving up. Yeah. It's actually really helping you. I mean, I don't think you would have run into John Paterno, who I know you've been doing some stuff with, and it's it's smart. It's smart to be if you're driven to do it, then put that energy into doing stuff. And if the stuff can't be making hit records, then do something around it that could help you get there.
Yeah, it's been like rocket fuel for me. It's crazy. Yeah, just, I mean, obviously, like getting in the room with you guys and just even on the video sheets, just being able to be in the room with you and watch that stuff happen in real time and all of that's just been incredible. Like I felt like my progression as an engineer just went through the roof there. But
awesome.
Yeah. I just want to add, you know, in and out of the frustration, I've also, you know, yes, I've asked myself, what else am I going to do? But one of the things that I've always realized is I just want to be involved in some creative process, primarily musically, because that's what I do and like. But, you know, if somebody had said to me early in my career, you're not good enough or whatever, or I just didn't get enough work, I'm sure I would have been doing some tweaky, geary, musically thingy in my. It's not like I would have been a real estate or, you know, this is what I do. This is what I like. This is who I am. So I think that, yes, it's smart to assess, but it's also, you know, it's okay to be comfortable in some realm of if this is what you like to do, realize that there's a comfort zone there too.
Right.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so let's do another question from these guys. This would be interesting. It'd be neat to see what you guys are doing these days with it. So this is another one from Alejandro. He says, hello, Andrew and Tony. What advice would you give to clients when sending mixes to you or other engineers?
When sending mixes or like sending the stuff to be mixed?
I think that he means the stuff to be mixed since he says clients. So.
Tony?
So do you guys have like, yeah, how do you request files from people? And
I mean, I could be specific. I've got like a little one-page thing that my manager sends that nobody ever reads. I personally want the Pro Tools session that made the rough mix that you've sent me that everybody's listening to. I need to open it up and it needs to sound like that. I know Pro Tools well enough that I'm fine to get your slightly messy session as long as tracks are named. Fine, leave the routing, leave the automation. I can sift through it. Other people will want the stuff flattened, but it still has to sound that way. And it's rough mixes are not rough mixes. They're so involved, and none of that happened in the recording process. It's all in the mixing process. That's how I want stuff. And if it can't be in Pro Tools, then it's a bucket full of WAV files that's processed and unprocessed. But if I decide to use the processed, it's going to sound like where you left off. And then I can always go back and undo things. So that's how I like to get it.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, yeah. I could add only one thing to that, and that is, you know, my assumption is that the artist has been involved in that process. I know most of the artists I work with are involved in that pre-mixing stages. The last thing I want to do is, you know, try to recreate something that they love, that they've been living with for a year. You know, I don't want to have to recreate it. I can, but I prefer not to.
Well, like you're talking about the Pharrell tracks you get where it's like, okay, don't mess with this, this, and this. There's a huge difference between don't change this, this, and this, or you better make those three things sound exactly the way I did. And like, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. If you spent the time, you've spent the time. And I think it's for other engineers working on projects that can be really difficult. For the tracking engineer who feels as though, well, hold on, I've mixed the record, but now you're sending it to someone else and they want to strip the stuff off. But and I've definitely been on the other end of this. I've tracked lots and lots of records that I did not get to mix. That is part of the production process. It doesn't matter if you're mixing. I mean, you talk about the stuff that we would get from Stuart on, I mean, I've only had experience with 2 tracks, but EXO and No Angels showed up, like, you sure this still needs mixing? And then once you get into it, you realize, like, oh, here's what I can do and what I can do. But so advanced, so much automation and creative stuff going on that was just Sonics. But he's making the record. You don't strip the stuff off.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. Cool.
But you got to name the tracks. You can't send stuff out that says Audio 1.
With crazy routing, like the dog bus.
That's all right. I don't care. I don't care what you call it, as long as you call it something.
Right. Okay, so Adam Kessler asks, how important was your manager or management in your success?
Mine was partnership, 50-50. Really, I'm not kidding. I've only had 2 managers. And my first manager was a woman named Duffy Mockery, and that was my partner. She is to this day still one of my best friends on the planet. And my clients would call her and have like psychology sessions, I mean, everyone. And I'm saying, like, they wouldn't even talk to me like they talked to her.
Mm-hmm.
She got me paid. She brought in an air of professionalism that I probably didn't have. And my current manager, Jason, same thing. Just, he's my partner, and we're doing this together. This is our business. He's got other guys. Duffy didn't have as many other people as Jason does, but nonetheless, I feel it's a partnership, and we're trying to run a business together, and I make decisions together. I ultimately, it's my decision in the end what to do, but no, it's very, very important for me. It has been.
And if whoever's watching this who didn't watch part 1, you can skip through on YouTube if you don't want to watch the whole thing, though it's quite good. But there's a big conversation about how you ended up being with Duffy. So I think it's definitely worth watching. It's a great explanation of the dynamic of how that can happen.
Yeah. It's a thing. It's a funny thing too, but it's an amazingly wonderful thing.
Awesome. Do you have anything to add to that, Andrew?
No, I mean it's the same. It's like I mean, there are a million different ways to think about how it is, but I love the way Tony describes it, because you've got someone involved in your career, because that's the deal. You're not, especially when they have a larger roster, like, you're not involved in their career really. They're involved in your career more, but it's a partnership, and they're there because they have skills you don't have. They can do things that you cannot do, and you've got to realize that. And it's a weird thing, especially when you're younger, where it's like getting a manager seems like, oh, now I'll finally work, and like, well, but that's not the way that works either. I mean, one of the very first things Frank McDonough ever said to me was, I don't get people work. Now, that's not true. There's tons of work that's come through him because he's got relationships I would never have. And someone will send him stuff and say, who you got that's good for this or whatever. And he can get me work that I want sometimes that I couldn't possibly get myself, because he's good at talking to people. Like, I cannot talk to somebody unless there's a reason for me to talk to them in their minds. I can't go introduce myself. Even now, I can't walk up to a band and say, God, I think you guys are great. Look, oh, you want to work together. I can't do it. So that's something Frank's really good at. So it's absolutely a partnership of overlapping goals, but really distinct skill sets.
Can I throw in a story?
Yes.
Okay. So everything you're saying is exactly correct. Managers don't get your work. But so And I'm gonna amplify the point of not walking up to somebody and say, I really love your music and want to work with you. Did I tell you the
Cool.
story
No,
already?
I don't think so.
So I went to a show that the Roots were doing. This is 15 plus years ago. I went to a show the Roots were doing, and I love the Roots. I just think they're amazing and really smart and funny and great musicians. And a friend of mine like brought me backstage, and I did exactly that. Only add some alcohol to the whole situation,
Right.
and probably some weed. And then I'm in their fucking dressing room, and the show's over. They just did their set, and I'm just like, I love you guys. I really want to work with you. Here's my I don't know if I gave him my number or whatever. Just
And how'd that
don't
go?
do it. Just don't to this day. And I tell people freely, just don't do it. Whereas my manager could have, if I had just gone in there and said, hey, great job, great
Exactly.
set.
Then they would have been like, oh, and he wants to work with us too. Oh, that's awesome. Not, yeah.
But my manager could call up the next day and go, hey, Tony saw your set, loves you. She has no problem making cold calls, but you and I sitting there saying, really, really dig this way, this record, because really all you're doing is saying whoever they made a record with previously was really good and you should use them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas the manager's going to call up and go, yo, you need Tony, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And you're never as well informed as you should be. And it's because I'd completely forgotten about this. But so a friend of mine, Joel Shear, amazing guitar player, he lives in LA, and he had a band, and we did an EP and we did a residency at the Viper Room. So we're playing like every Monday for a month or once a month for 4, whatever it was. So Joel's friends with Damien Rice. And so Damien comes over. Now this is before the first album has even come out, Damien's album. And so Damien's like, hey, well, I'll open. Because it's just our night, like whatever. So Damien's going to open. And he did a cover of Creep. And it was like, everything Damien does, it was just jaw-dropping. Holy shit. And I talked to him a little bit beforehand because Joel's like, hey, it's my friend Damien. He's a singer. He's going to do a song tonight. Like, okay, great. And I went up to him and said, man, that was really amazing. I'd love to mix something for you at some point. And he gave me like the death eye at that because he made, if you don't know the story, the first record he made basically in his bedroom and recorded everything and mixed it all himself. And he's so meticulous, and there's an aesthetic that you cannot get if you're not inside his head. And it was like I said, I'd really like to punch you in the face several times.
Right.
Like, would that be okay?
Right.
And it's because I'm an idiot. I don't know how to talk. I should have just said, you're amazing.
Yeah. It's all you need.
Just
Let the manager do the fucking talking.
Yeah. So that's it. So that's it. So that's don't drink and don't tell people that you want to work with them. Just tell them how much you love them.
Oh, you're really good, man.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fucking awesome.
I really love your set, man.
We had the manager at Flux on for a live stream during the whole stay-at-home thing, and he actually had a really, really good tip about just drinking at parties and shows in general, which was just like a reminder that it's like you are basically working in that moment. If you're at a show, if you're at a networking event, you're on the clock. So, make sure you can perform, kind of a thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't get sloppy.
Right. Okay. So somebody just pointed out that Mole came through.
Oh yeah. Well, Mole and Squid had a really good fight earlier. They also, I wasn't going to interrupt Tony, but they've taken to now, they can't be bothered to go around to the cat door, so they just meow at the window. And for about 10 minutes, they're like looking at me. Normally, I let them in. And they must be thinking like, what a dick. What's going on? So, yeah, but they're both in. Squid's on the chair here.
I brought him a mouse last week. What's the problem?
Yeah, there's
Nice.
squid and moles elsewhere doing mole stuff. I don't know.
Nice.
Well,
Okay, so one person in the chat wanted to say, thanks for giving the Puremix community the opportunity to mix a Jason Mraz track. I learned a lot from it. And what were the reasons that made Tony choose the top mixes?
You know, the choices I made were based around how I thought they paid attention to the song and the performance and their execution of that. I think that I think overall it felt like people were trying to do my mix. And whenever I thought somebody was trying to do their own thing or step out, I thought that was a positive. And yeah, that's how I would judge anybody's work, including my own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mentioned this earlier that if we mixed the same song twice in a row, we would not do the same thing. You start down a road with the very first thing you do, and that informs everything that happens. Getting a phone call halfway through informs them. Like everything that happens, mixing is pretty random, actually. Yeah. And the way the stuff gets built up is so. The point being, obviously, especially like on that record, the mixes are amazing, but copying it proves nothing. It's a great exercise. Doing a sound-alike is one of the best teaching tools you can ever do. And I think for tracking, way more than even mixing. Like you go make something sound like Soundgarden. Good luck.
Yeah.
Like do Black Hole Sun.
Yeah, you got some skills.
There you go. And you will learn a bazillion things, but that's not, you can't make a living doing sound-alikes unless you're Weird Al, who makes a very good living doing that.
Yeah, nice. So on that note, actually, when you guys do a mix for a big artist or a small artist, but maybe like some of the more high pressure ones where you might have a rough from them, and I know that the like general thing is that you're trying to stay in the same vein of the rough, but when you try something like going with like a tonal shape of the mix, and that comes back as not what they wanted, do you guys usually have conversations about like, well, we can take it this other direction? Or is that the point where they're like, well, we sent it to 3 mixers and we're going to go with another one because it came in closer or something? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it depends on what your impetus was, right? If your impetus is that their direction is not serving the song that well, I think I just did a mix for a friend and a client, and I thought I knew exactly what this guy liked, and I stuck pretty close to the rough because generally he works a lot on the rough, and I was surprised that when I sent it to him and he came back and he was like, yeah, I'm not digging this. And it was a relief actually, because I felt like I wanted to go in a different direction. So I think there are 2 perspectives here. And one is, and I probably mentioned this in the first part, but having one in your pocket and one you present is a smart thing to do. Quite often I will go off on wherever my brain takes me, and then I'll A/B and say, he's going to hate this, so I better at least do something similar to him with some of these ideas in it. And then I'll present him with my idea as an alternative. And depending on how well this guy or girl, they may listen to it and think about it, or they may just want it exactly the way they had it. So I think having, one of the great things about the way we work today is you can go in a different direction for an hour and get right back to where you were within minutes. And the way that I work, quite often I'll just duplicate my ideas within the session. I won't even bring up a new section, or sometimes I'll just duplicate the whole song further down the timeline and fuck with that, So I think that as long as your process is trying to serve the song and be creative and be interesting, then I think that that's always something that they should listen to. And you can, it's fine to sort of polish something they've sent you and make it better and make it interesting or more interesting. But if you really want to try something new, that's fine too, but offer it maybe as an alternative.
And I think the tail end of your question is actually a really important thing to talk about too, because this goes back to that Ricky Martin mix. If it's just like, well, no, what this other guy did was closer, so you're out of here, that situation is ignoring the fact that the mix has to be a collaboration. It can't just be like what came out of my head on my first pass is going to be perfect, because if that's the case, like, well, I won't even send it to you. I'm just going to send it straight to mastering, right? Because whatever I do is going to be perfect. And like I've said several times already, what we do is going to be different every time we do it. If they had decided that Tony was the guy on that mix, he would have nailed it and it would have been huge. And it's not like Tony was the wrong guy. It was just the wrong situation. And nobody in that situation was going to be the person who was going to finish the mix. So I think it's tough when you're not at a high enough level to just say, look, hire me or whatever. But the shootout thing is a disaster always. It sucks and is completely random. And you don't learn enough from a shootout to actually know if someone's the right person to mix your record. The way you know is you listen to other stuff. Because it's when you talk about like taking elements from the rough mix too, it's the feel of the rough mix. You might actually completely change the drums, but the drums are feeling the way they felt on the rough, if that's what you're trying to do, because when they got to the chorus, it just felt great. It doesn't matter if sonically they're anything like that at the end. Now, it could be that the snare is super important. Well, fine, put the snare back to how it was, but it's how the stuff feels. And you don't get to that unless you're a really good listener. As an artist getting stuff in a mixed shootout, you're not going by feel. You're going by, like, I like the kick drum. Because none of them are right. So, anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Well, very smart.
It's very good, blah, blah, blah. Okay. How are you guys doing on time?
I'm getting to the end.
Back to work. Awesome. All right.
Yeah, one more thing to do, and then I got.
All right. Well, so let's ask another question, because also I want to remind everybody that we have something else to discuss that's pretty important, timely, and it does involve Tony, though not directly, but at the moment. I meant directly in the English way of I'll be there directly, which means soon, but it will. But anyway, so you want to do one more or two more,
things
Tony?
One more, and then we'll jump on your thing. I'm texting the baby.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Okay. All right. This one's from Jonathan McMillan, and he says, you talked about working in a team and getting new tips and new ideas. What's the newest idea you've incorporated into your mixing?
I think some of them are just plug-in ideas. Some of them are analog gear. The newest idea probably came from I think Stuart. I was talking to Stuart, and he was like, I'm not using a limiter on my mix bus anymore, and I was like, oh fuck, I don't know that I can do that. And so I tried doing it and found that there was an element of fun that I was lacking or that I had missed from back in the day when I didn't have a limiter on my mix, which I don't know how long it's been, but at least 10 years now. So and a level of creativity, I think, as well, that brought. I mean, I still have to strap a limiter on there in the end to get the level to where the client is used to hearing it, or they'll just hate it because it's lower than the rough. But that I think is one of the more recent ones. I think some of the others are, Tyler Scott, one of my old team members, he'll just shoot me like, have you checked this plugin out, bro? And, that's another one that happens quite a lot, and it's quite cool. So it happens in various forms.
Well, I think that's actually going to be a really good segue, because I get all of my plugin release news from Greg Wells' Instagram, because he loves new stuff.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
great. It's great because he mentions things like what's the new low-end synthesis plugin that he was talking about? Is it from Leapwing? I can't even remember what it is.
Oh
now.
yeah, it has an R in the name.
Yeah,
I think.
And I haven't
talked about it on his newsletter.
I haven't gotten yeah, exactly. Fab mentioned it too. And I haven't downloaded the demo of it, but like I'm always looking for that. Like when I found Low Ender and there's a quote from Chad Blake on the website, I thought, that's it, I'm sorted. But they all do it in such different ways that I'm always looking for stuff like that. So yeah, Greg Wells' Instagram. So does this bring us to our other topic? I think
it's called Route 1.
Route 1. Route 1. Okay.
And it absolutely does. That was a great segue.
So look, I'm not going to give any specifics because I feel like it's important for me not to give too much away. But what I'm going to do right now, and unfortunately, Tony, you're not going to see it because you're not watching the actual stream. I'm going to play a little montage of some of Greg's Instagram posts because I think it's important. So I just got to make it so I can see it because it's important. I know when it's over. So here's a little montage.
Mark, can you send me the link?
Yeah. Let's see here. Hopefully I can get it quick enough.
Montage, man.
It's a montage of Greg's got way too much time on his hands, basically.
I'm saying. Man.
Okay, it's in our chat in the Zoom.
Okay.
So the hashtag on every single one of these is, you've seen him on a couple of these, is release the interview. And I'm not going to respond to that, but I just want to get to the end of this. Why am I the Wookiee? Why?
I love the one on top of the tank.
Yeah. And then when he got Guillaume involved as Curly in the Three Stooges one, I think that's when Guillaume just lost his mind. He's like, well, that's it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you've seen that, and I've got one thing I will say to that, and one thing only, and this is what I would say to that. That's little Indiana Jones, but it isn't Indiana Jones, is it? It's Indiana Wells. Between Two Shores. That's all I'm going to say. There's going to be, you keep an eye out all week. There's something. And next week, after interviewing Susan Rogers, which should be absolutely amazing. If you don't know about Susan Rogers, do a quick little Wikipedia, and we're going to get into some shit, because she has made some amazing records, but now she's been teaching for years and does amazing research into the way humans hear and listen and respond to things. So that's going to be really, really good. But then after that, there will be a little something to do with everything you've just seen. And that's it. I don't want to say anymore. Tony knows what I'm talking about. Greg definitely knows what I'm talking about, and I think we'll just leave it at that. Is that all too cryptic, Mark?
Awesome.
Is that good?
Oh, I think it's pretty good. I would continue watching Greg's Instagram because who knows what he's going to do. It's
Yeah.
also probably the best Instagram that's on Instagram.
Yeah, and
And
this is part of why we've waited so long to do what we're doing, because it's kept Greg creative and given him something to do, because he has nothing else to do with all of his work and children and, you know, and all his
yeah,
photoshopping.
yeah.
So
Right. Yeah. So, it looks like the chat room's figuring it out. They know the name of the show.
yeah, well, is it a show? You never know.
Right. True. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the Puremix Instagram, and you guys will find out what it is. And
Yeah,
also
yeah.
next
This
week.
should be a good week, and it'll be a really fun thing at the end of next week's interview. And next week's interview is going to be great anyway. So Tony, thank you so much for all your time. Now
Thank you,
twice,
Tony.
I think added up, you're kind of at one of the longest we've had.
Oh, okay. That
So
makes me feel better.
yeah, because you and you know
So-
what you get for that is absolutely nothing. Just less time of your own, basically.
Well, I get to hang out with you both, and that's a big deal. And yeah, and chat with everybody. So it was
Yeah,
fun.
well, it's been awesome, and I'm gonna try to learn not to do the Chris Farley thing from now on, because we'll get to some other stuff. All right, I'm gonna put on the thanks for watching thing, and
All right.
that will do this. So, all right,
Thanks, everybody.
see you next week.